Even before 2020, the construction of new housing was not keeping pace with population growth. This was because of structural challenges like zoning restrictions or lengthy permitting processes in many cities. This is the speed to decision point of occupancy. A shortage of construction workers, just to name a few of the issues. Canada's low vacancy rate shows how imperative it is to address these challenges. The recent focus by all levels of government to increase housing construction is a welcome development. Shelter price inflation, the housing balance also has a consequence for shelter price inflation, which accounts for about 25% of total CPI. Shelter price inflation rose 6.1% in October and contributed 1.8 percentage points to the 3.1% we saw in October in total CPI. Higher mortgage interest costs are part of the reason shelter price inflation is high. When we raise interest rates, mortgage interest rate inflation typically goes up, and this was anticipated. But a decline in other components in shelter basket usually helps offset this rise. We have not seen the same degree of offset this time. If we look more closely at the data, we see rent inflation accelerated to a 40-year high in October. Okay. At the same time, components tied to housing prices have declined, but not as much as we had expected, given the high mortgage rates and the slowing economy. Most newcomers rent when they first arrive in Canada, which works to push demand for rental housing and can lead to a short-term pressures on rent inflation. Research shows this pressure dissipates relatively quickly in a flexible, well-supplied housing market. However, Canada's housing market is not well supplied due to the complex set of structural issues I've already noted. To get a better sense of what's happening with rents in Canada, let's do a quick international comparison. Living across the river from Detroit, we are all probably very familiar with just how different housing markets can be between Canada and the United States. In the US, rent inflation had risen meaningfully, but it has now peaked and is declining. In Canada, it continues to rise. So why are we seeing such different stories? The difference in population growth is likely one reason rent inflation looks so different across the board. But the big issue is that Canada's housing supply has not kept pace with recent increases in immigration. This looks to differ from the US, where multi-unit construction increased significantly to recently hit a record high. The US has traditionally taken a large share of immigrants who work in construction, contributing to home building. Indeed, while Canada is welcoming more newcomers than ever, only 3% of non-permanent residents work in construction.